Hi there everyone, right, another lesson. We're just going to look at now today completing the square, right? So this is a technique which you may be asked to do directly, but you also may be asked to find a turning point, which is what this is all really about, all right? So we're talking about a quadratic equation or a quadratic graph, and this is really the purpose of what this is for. But we'll walk through the stages of doing this, and I'll keep talking about those aspects as we kind of go through. All right, so complete the square. So let's have a look. So it's a method of rewriting a quadratic with a squared in a bracket, which is what I just kind of mentioned. All right, and it always takes this form. All right, so it'll have x plus something in a bracket, squared, and then plus a number. All right, now I'll talk about plus and a plus at the end. Of course, it doesn't need to be. They could be negatives, but we're just talking about two values in there, so two variables. All right, so it could be x minus something in a bracket squared minus something. All right, but those a and b could be negative numbers in that respect. All right, so but it always takes that form. And then again, in an exam, you may be asked to write a quadratic in that particular format. All right, so that's what they're asking you to do, is they're going to ask you to complete the square. If you see something looking like that, this is exactly the method that they're after. All right, so completing the square. All right, so how do you do it? So when I look to complete the square, you'll see it has to be a quadratic. It'll often look like this. So x squared plus 6x plus 4 is an example. And the first step we were looking at, and it's kind of coming here, is a is always the half the coefficient of the x term. All right, so that's a bit of a mouthful, but what we're looking at is this number here, the number of the x's. Okay, so that value there of the a is always half of this one. All right, so that's going to be your first step effectively. So if that there is going to be a 6, which it is, then the thing that goes in my bracket is going to be a 3. All right, so that's pretty much a given. Now there's nothing to say that that can't be a odd number or more of a horrible number, and therefore you would end up with either a decimal or a fraction in there, which is less than perfect, but you need to understand that that's potentially all right. So depending on the paper that you're sitting, if you're sitting a higher paper, that might make it awkward for you and give you something that involves a fraction, but the method again is very much the same. It's still half that value there. All right, so that should be your first step. All right, so here we go. So half of 6 is 3, so the bracket will look like x plus 3 squared. So that's your first bit. Okay, the next bit is trying to identify what this b value is, what goes here. All right, and again, depending on what you're being taught in class, and depending on how your teacher decides to do it, depending on what you do next. All right, now there's two ways you can think about it. Here I've got 3 squared. All right, 3 squared. All right, if I was going to do 3 squared, well, what's 3 times 3? 9. All right, so if I was going to expand that as a double bracket, so x plus 3 and x plus 3, if I was going to go down the whole route of expanding a double bracket, then when I get to the point of doing 3 times 3, I would get a 9. Now I don't have 9 here, I have 4. All right, so I need to basically change what would be a 9 into a 4. So therefore I need to take away 5 from that. All right, so that's one way of looking at it, is try and think about what 3 squared is, and then what do I need to do to 3 squared to get to 4? I need to take away 5. All right, so here we go. So when you expand x plus 3 squared, you get x squared plus 6x plus 9, and you can see I've got 9 there and a 4 there, so there's a discrepancy. All right, so from this I need to take away 5 from it. All right, so here x plus 3 squared, take away 5, and that's what we've got. All right, because when I expand that properly, I get this, and then I take away the 5 and I get this. All right, so you can see I've got x plus 3 squared and then plus b, which is what it asked for, but of course in this case it's a negative. All right, so if I ask you for the values of a and b, and that might be the case in the question, my value of a is 3, positive 3, and my value of b is minus 5. All right, and that's just kind of relating this to this in the same way. Okay, so let's have another look at another one. So you've got x squared minus 12x plus 40. So if I ask you what's the value of a, well, hopefully you can see straight away what that needs to be. Well, it needs to be half of that, but again, it's a minus, so that stays with it. So in the bracket, it's going to be x minus 6 squared. All right, again, pretty standard kind of approach to kind of what you need to do. All right, we then got to think about this bit here. All right, well, what is 6 squared? Well, 6 squared is 36. Ignore the negative. And the reason I mentioned ignore the negative, because a minus times a minus is a positive. So it doesn't really matter what's in there in terms of the sign, because when I square it, it becomes become positive anyway. All right, so anyway, so 6 squared is 36, but of course I've got 40, so I'm going to need a little bit more than my 36, so I need to add an additional 4 to that, don't I? All right, so this means you need to add 4 to get the original quadratic. All right, so you've got x minus 6 squared, add another 4, and that gives you the 40. All right, so let's think about that again. 6 squared, 36, plus 4 is going to give me 40, and that's it. Okay, nothing too strenuous about that one, just a very, very standard process. Now, I mentioned at the beginning of the video about this relating to the turning point of a graph. It does have a big reference to the turning point of graph. Not covering it today, but if you're interested to know what that's all about, please look up the video on turning points of a graph, which is another video which will explain what the purpose of completing the square and how that gives you the turning point. Okay, thanks for listening.